Welcome to R&R Livin' Life. In this episode, Rick and I hike to the summit of Mount Kosciuszko and take in the stunning alpine scenery. Before calling it quits for the day, we continue along Alpine Way towards Königsalben, stopping to check out Tom Groggin's camping area, 23 kilometres from Thredbo, along a winding switchback road, before returning to Jindabyne. On arriving in Jindabyne, we set up camp before making a trip to Thredbo to see how long it would take us to get there and to buy our tickets for the chairlift, as we planned to hike to the summit of Mount Kosciuszko the following day. Later that afternoon we watched storms, including a nice lightning display out towards Thredbo, so we're not at all sure what the day would bring. Were we in for a surprise? We did not have to be at Thredbo early, as the chairlift only started its run at 9 o'clock. A slow start for us, but it gave us time to enjoy the morning. Though the day started with a few clouds and a slight breeze, we could not have wished for a nicer day to go hiking. Rick and I had packed for all eventualities, as you never know what the weather could be like. Warmer clothes, snacks, plenty of water, rain attire, and Rick always carries the backpack with our safety gear and first aid kit whenever we go hiking. So we were ready for our hike. I thought he had told me it would be 3 kilometres up, but how wrong was my hearing. We had completed a hike in Carnarvon Gorge at the end of last year, hiking just over 14 kilometres return from the art gallery with side trips to the Moss Garden and amphitheatre and many steps, and I thought that I would be okay doing this hike. Was I in for a surprise? As the express chairlift starts at 9 o'clock, Rick and I were there to watch the unstacking of the chairs, an interesting undertaking, before we were to catch our ride to Eagle's Nest at the top where the hike starts. Now, I have often said that I was terrified of heights, which I am, but the choice between walking up Merritt's Nature Trail from Thredbo village to the top of the chairlift, said to be a difficult 4-kilometre track that takes around 2 to 3 hours uphill to Eagle's Nest, as well as the hike to the summit, or catching the chairlift, there was very little doubt in choosing the lift. An additional 8-kilometre hike for the day was a tiring thought. So on I got. I was surprised by the scenic ride, even to the point of actually enjoying the scenery, serenity and peacefulness of it, only to be disturbed by the bumps as we went over the towers. At one point we did stop, which left us swinging for a short while. I was not happy, but the peacefulness and tranquillity, with only a slight breeze and the bird calls, had a very calming effect. It is hard to describe how at peace I felt on the 15-minute ride to the top. I even had the courage to watch a mountain bike rider skim past on one of the trails that crisscrossed the mountain. I took a wrong step getting off Kosciuszko Express chairlift and had to be rescued by the lovely attendant at the top, or I would have been on my way down again. After getting myself sorted, Rick and I began our 13-kilometre return hike, a grade 3 hike suitable for most ages and abilities, with some bushwalking experience recommended, to the top of the highest point in Australia. The path begins as a gravel path, but after about the first kilometre, around about the first creek, the track turned into a steel mesh walking platform, there to protect the environment. This was the easy part, with the trail dotted with wildflowers and stunning rock formations. The mountain sides seemed to be weeping as little streams trickled under the walkway, and the little wetlands glistened in the morning sun. At around the 2-kilometre mark we stopped at Mount Kosciuszko Lookout, set amongst alpine herb fields with panoramic views of Mount Kosciuszko, the upper catchment of the Snowy River, and the rugged rocky granite tops of the Ram's Head Range, with its peaks ranging from around 2,100 metres to 2,195 metres. Unfortunately, we did not see any of the ancient Alps covered in snow, but could imagine the harsh winter conditions in the snowy mountains. From here, the track had some short, steep hill sections and some longer, gradual sections flanked by the alpine wilderness. I had many stops to enjoy the stunning scenery and to catch my breath. The track crosses the headwaters of the Snowy River before climbing above Lake Cooperamba, located at 2,048 metres, Australia's highest lake, about 4 kilometres from the express chairlift, one of only 5 lakes formed by glacial activity on the Australian mainland, around 400 metres long, with a maximum depth of about 5 metres. The lake is located about 800 metres south of the summit of Mount Kosciuszko. But that did not mean we had only 800 metres to go, as the trail wound its way around the mountains, not straight up. We stopped again for a short break at Rawson Pass, and so I could visit Australia's highest toilet before continuing the last push to the summit, along the uneven gravel path that wound its way gradually to the summit. The sweeping 360-degree views across the snowy mountains and the Victorian high country was wow, absolutely breathtaking. We stayed a while to soak in the fresh alpine air, enjoyed a snack, and where we revelled in our sense of achievement before returning along the track to Thredbo. The return hike back to the express chairlift was just as amazing as the hike up. We took the return hike slower, as on the hike up we wanted to reach the summit without too many others, as we had been one of the first off the chairlift, and had wanted to enjoy the solitude of the mountain without interruptions from enthusiastic tourists. We stopped multiple times to enjoy the wilderness and the stunning views. As we got closer to the lift, the more people we passed with multiple large groups on their way up. Rick and I returned to Thredbo after about 3.5 hours of hiking. Wanting to make the most of our visit, we took the Merritt's gondola ride to the cruiser area and Merritt's Mountain House to check out some of the 40 kilometres of adrenaline-fueled tracks that wound their way down the mountain. There are some crazy people out there who risk their bodies taking some of those corners we saw. Our time spent at Thredbo was breathtaking, even in the autumn. It was an incredible day. From the gondola ride we could see the Thredbo Alpine Coaster, the first ever year-round alpine coaster in the Southern Hemisphere. That is a 1.5 kilometre ride whereby passengers hit up to 40 kilometres per hour, though the rider can control their own pace, as they speed around the uphill-downhill track that features a tunnel, bridges and circles, all while being immersed in the alpine environment. And that was a bit too much for Rick and I, even though it did look interesting. Mount Kosciuszko's summit lookout marks the top of Australia's highest mountain in Kosciuszko National Park. By world standards, Mount Kosciuszko is not high at just 2,228 metres, compared to younger mountains such as the Himalayas that have towering peaks over 8,000 metres. It is highly unlikely that Strzelecki was the first person to climb Mount Kosciuszko, as the Aboriginal people of the Monaro and groups from the southern tablelands, south coast and northern Victoria visited these higher peaks for thousands of years to feast on the bogong moth, which gather here in summer, and to conduct trade and perform cultural and spiritual ceremonies. Stockmen began visiting the mountains from the 1830s in search of summer pasture, and it is probable that some of them would have climbed the mountain. From the valley of the Murray River, the Polish explorer Paul Strzelecki ascended the Australian Alps in February 1840. A pinnacle, rocky and naked, predominated over several others, was chosen by Strzelecki for a point of trigonometrical survey, and gave it the name Mount Kosciuszko, after the Polish freedom fighter General Kosciuszko, whose tomb is a similar-shaped mound in Krakow. Paul Strzelecki, a Polish explorer, geologist and scientist, though he didn't finish school, possessed a keen mind and taught himself geology. After spending a short time in the Prussian army, he sampled minerals and soils in North and South America before travelling throughout the Pacific Islands to New Zealand and arriving in Australia in 1839, where he would spend 4 years exploring, mapping and completing a geological survey of Australia, zigzagging across New South Wales, Victoria and then Tasmania as far as 250 kilometres inland. On foot and with the help of Aboriginal guides, Strzelecki entered new territories with permission from the Aboriginal people. After climbing and naming Mount Kosciuszko, he continued south through the area he named Gippsland after the then governor. Things went amiss once they passed Latrobe River. On the edge of starvation, the expedition abandoned the horses and all their specimens and survived for 3 weeks thanks mainly to the Aboriginal guides, reaching Melbourne in May 1840. From Melbourne, Strzelecki went to Tasmania, known then as Van Diemen's Land, and traversed a large part of Tasmania on foot, documenting much of the state's geology. In April 1843, at the age of 45, Strzelecki left Australia and returned to London, and in 1845 became a British citizen and published Physical Description of New South Wales and Van Diemen's Land. It was the first detailed scientific book about Australia. His incredible contributions of finding gold, naming Australia's highest mainland peak, mapping New South Wales and setting up irrigation channels, and his contribution to agricultural and economic growth in Australia earned him a knighthood. In recognition of Kosciuszko's unique value as a conservation area, it has been named a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. More than half of the park, over 350,000 hectares, has been declared wilderness, including the Juggernaut, Western Fall and Indy Wilderness areas located in the Cancoban area. The park's alpine and subalpine areas are home to rare plant and animal species found nowhere else in the world, such as the southern corroboree frog. Although Thredbo is primarily a ski destination in the winter months, Thredbo Village is an all-year resort. Located below the snowline and perched precariously on the side of a hill, looking across at the ski slopes and the chairlift, Thredbo is as close as Australia will ever get to a genuine European-style alpine settlement. The chalets with their steep roofs, the lodges which look as though they have been lifted from Austria or Switzerland, the narrow winding streets, the skiing and bracing mountain walks ambience all help to make this important ski town in the snowy mountains like no other town in Australia. In winter, the surrounding mountains boast one of the largest snow-making systems in the southern hemisphere, now very necessary with the advent of global warming, the longest ski runs in Australia and facilities to explore the backcountry and enjoy cross-country skiing. On returning to Thredbo, we made our way further along Alpine Way, a steep, narrow and winding strip of bitumen between Cancoban, near the Victorian border, and Thredbo, with sweeping mountain views that peaked between the trees and unending vistas. We wound our way through tall mountain forests and past the dramatic western fall of the main range, with the highest and steepest part of the snowy mountains that catches the westerly airstream, allowing the tall mountain ash forests to grow in the moist soil below the tree line. The Kosciuszko Alpine Way is a 121-kilometre rural road in the Snowy Mountains region of New South Wales, connecting Jindabyne in the east to the New South Wales-Victorian border in the west, passing through the Thredbo Valley and Dead Horse Gap. It really was a scenic trip, even without the snow-capped peaks. In days gone by, Aboriginal people travelled this route to the high country, and more recently it was used as a drover's stock route and for the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme. We went as far as Tom Groggin's campground, set on the banks of the Upper Murray River, just off Alpine Way. One of the aims of this trip was to follow the Murray River from its headwaters to where it enters South Australia. The campground, in a lovely valley setting with stunning mountains and riverside backdrops, is said to be generally milder in the valley than higher areas of Kosciuszko National Park. The open grasslands in the valley are home to a large population of resident eastern grey kangaroos, with emus, echidnas, bushtail possums, lyrebirds, flame robins and crimson rosellas also frequenting the area. What a perfect day it had turned out to be, with crystal clear skies, 360-degree views that stretched as far as the eye could see, and an uplifting experience on the chairlift. We could not have asked for a better day. The weather was absolutely perfect, especially after the storms in the area the previous night. The following day, though, was much colder, with a stiffer breeze and clouds, so I think we had bagged the perfect day for our hike. I was surprised that the hike itself wasn't that difficult, though my thigh muscles did get a workout on some of the steeper climbs, and thankfully no steps, just the steel mesh to get used to walking on. Our day spent in the Kosciuszko region, visiting Thredbo and then the Tom Groggins campground, was a day to remember. All in all, the Kosciuszko hike was an enjoyable hike, with the added bonus of the stunning scenery, the tranquility and crisp fresh air, as was the winding, steep and switchback trip down to Tom Groggin's campground and back. I have spent quite some time trying to decide which photos to cut and which to leave in. With so many to decide from, I found it hard deciding which to include and which ones to cut. Hence the long video just on Kosciuszko. I hope you have enjoyed our Kosciuszko experience. It will be one day that I will take a very, very long time to forget. Give us a thumbs up if you have enjoyed this episode and leave a comment. Join us next time as we continue our journey, seeing wild horses in the high country, follow the Tumut River and make our way to Tarcutta and Wagga Wagga. Stay safe and enjoy life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.